I'd like to introduce once again Antonia, who's been well introduced, and the bio information is available. Professor Edwin Rip Smith at the end of the table from USC, professor of international law and international relations there, and an eminent authority on national security issues, among other things. And we have a prize panelist substitute. David Kay unfortunately couldn't make it at the last moment, and Shirin Ershadi,
Yes.
Sorry,
That's all right.
is joining us from the ICA board, and also has an eminent background as a lawyer in Iran. She studied law before the revolution and received an LLM there as well, and also is an expert on women's studies, has an LLM from UCLA in that subject. So I'd like to open up the discussion and just make a couple of observations. Initially, one of the... Is this on? Oh, that's better. Initially, one of the things that impressed me by the discussion of the current efforts of the International Criminal Court, which are just as obvious as indicated, just really getting into trials, is that it's an all-African cast. And I mean, there is the sorts of crimes that we talk about and that are enumerated in the Rome Treaty taking place all over the world in other locations as well. Why just those four major cases and all involving Africa?
Thank you for this question. It's actually a question that we get quite regularly, and it's an important question because it relates to the jurisdiction and the mandate of the court and to its core mandate, that is to be a judicial institution. As you said in the Rome Statute, it is clearly stated that we deal only with war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. And I'm not sure that war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide are happening all over the world, but there are certainly situations where allegedly one could say that this sort of crimes are happening that are not being currently investigated by the court. The reason mainly is, first of all, because of the jurisdiction of the court, which is limited by territorial aspects, which are that the court can only look at crimes that are committed on the territory of or by nationals of a state party. And as you know, 109 state parties have ratified the Rome Statute, which is a lot, but which doesn't cover the whole of the world. We hope that one day this will be the case. Actually, we expect that this will be the case. But for now, we are limited to the scope. And if we were to go beyond this scope, we would then lose our legitimacy as a legal institution, because then we would go beyond what is said in the Rome Statute. The only way we can look at states that are not party is, as I mentioned before, through a referral by the Security Council, which happened in the Darfur case. But this is the only way we can go beyond that. Now, you said that we're focusing on Africa. We are actually focusing on the crimes that are relevant to the Rome Statute, on the most serious crimes of concern to the international community. And I don't think it's frivolous to say that they're happening nowadays in the cases that we have. When you look at what's happening in Darfur, when you look at what's happening in the DRC, when you look at what's happening in the country neighboring Uganda right now, you have a situation that is extremely serious and that deserves the attention of the international community. But it's also important to state that we are also monitoring and analyzing situations that are outside Africa. We're looking at Colombia, we're looking at Afghanistan, we're looking at Kenya, we're looking at Georgia, we're looking also at the Palestinian territories and Israel. These are all, I said Kenya, but apart.
If I may interrupt or intervene here, when you talk about looking at, does that mean you're actually formally involved in investigations, or?
No, it means that, as it is stated in the Rome Statute, we first analyze the situations and monitor the situation, which means assessing if we have the jurisdiction, which means seeing what the national authorities are doing, which means sending investigative teams there before we make a decision on whether or not to open an investigation. This is what we did for Central African Republic, for the DRC, for Uganda before we opened an investigation. So it's part of our work, but it doesn't mean that we will open an investigation. However, it means that we can. In Colombia, for instance, we have been monitoring the situation since the beginning of our operations because it's one of the most serious situations regarding the Rome Statute, but we haven't decided to open an investigation yet because the national authorities have been doing quite a lot in terms of addressing the crimes that have been committed in their territory. They have adopted the Ley de Justicia y Paz, which is part of a very developed process of judging and investigating the crimes that were committed there. The prosecutor has been to Colombia twice to follow up and to make sure that the promises and that the legislation is implemented. And this has been the case so far, so we haven't seen the need to open an investigation. But we are monitoring the situations, and if we decide that there is jurisdiction and there are not national proceedings, we will open an investigation.
Let me move to another case that was mentioned that's now in full form, the case against the sitting head of state in Sudan. And I want to ask Rip, what sort of implications does that have for the future of the court? Has it raised questions about overreaching, perhaps, in terms of jurisdiction of the court? Is it dangerous to try to indict a head of state? What about the issues of that apparently have been raised by other African heads of state with respect to the ongoing peace efforts in the Sudan, and what indicting the president might mean to those?
Well, as far back as the Genocide Convention, it was quite clear that there was an intention to avoid having impunity lie upon heads of state. Heads of state were to be at issue at all stages, and it's been considered with the ICC statute that heads of state would be accessible to the court, would be subject to the court's jurisdiction. But it turns out to be a fairly complex situation for different reasons, not the legal reasons, but the political reasons. And the situation that's involved in Darfur speaks to a number of these sorts of difficulties. The heads of African states are only part of the picture. In Darfur itself, interestingly enough, I was a consultant with a State Department group that was conducting lectures in Eritrea next door for members of the National Democratic Alliance in Sudan, an opposition group that was not a southern opposition group, but it had northern and southern participants. And their effort was to find a way to prepare themselves for the coalition government, which has come to pass. At that meeting, they said, watch Darfur.